On the side or on the sides. We'll be with you in a couple of minutes. Well, good evening, folk. We have a very eclectic group tonight, which is really nice. And what better way to spend a Sunday night out with a wine in your hand, if that's your go. And nice to see you here. My name's Andrew Dodd. A lot of people call me Doddy. I'm the pastor of the church here. I think I've been here for about 23 years. And it's my privilege to be your MC tonight. So wherever you're from, whatever your connections are with us or by being here tonight, you are certainly most welcome. I'd also like to welcome a few people that are joining us by Zoom. We've got a few people spread out who are listening to us tonight, and they can be very much a part of us. There's Alison in Dungog, where Tim's just come from. She's up there in Dungog listening, and a big smile. So so we're going a little bit. And Felicity Barclay is there. Is someone that I knew as a child. Our families were friends. It's just in this week through Spiritual Misfits, which came up, that we've reconnected. I said, "Are you the daughter of such and such?" He said, "Yep." So welcome, Felicity. Nice to have you here. Also like to welcome Tim and Meredy Costello. Welcome to you. Yeah, you're allowed to applaud. Are they? And tonight we're meeting on a Wabakal land, and I think we have a sense of appreciation for the millennia that they have spent as custodians of this area and of the waterways. And I think we also have a sense that we probably have a lot to learn from them as we continue to live on this land here. And welcome to Hamilton Baptist Church. Hamilton Baptist Church is 99 years old. We've been on this site for 96 years, and up until the 3rd of May, which was election day, we were part of the Association of New South Wales Baptist Church, but they decided to remove us because of our LGBT inclusion. That's another story, but we found a new tribe with the Open Baptists that we're very happy to be part of. The 4 values we have of our church here is that we're Jesus focused. That's not really that radical for a church, is it? We're committed to love, and that is particularly love over particular doctrines and things. We're also diverse and inclusive in lots of ways. And wherever we find ourselves in the world and whatever situation we find ourselves in, we strive to be gracefully present. So they're our values. We're sort of kicking around another one, which is along the lines of just being able to be here, who you are, whatever your journey's been, wherever you're up to, and particularly whatever questions you might have about deconstructing or reconstructing your faith. We like to be a space where that can be explored. There is a toilet just off the foyer there, a disability toilet, as well as a mixed toilet. It's just a single one. There are some toilets through the preschool here in that back corner. Now, you may or may not want to sort of do that during the night, but you're welcome to if you're really busting and that one is full. So there are a couple out there as well, but please be very tidy because the preschool's been cleaned for business tomorrow and we don't have a cleaner coming back in after that. If something goes really wrong, the mustering point is out the front. So there you go. We will probably, shortly I'll interview Tim, and that'll be quite an extensive get to know him type of interview, which is sort of loosely structured as to where we're going to. And we'll probably just have a very mini break. We can go back and get a bit more of the supper. Now, Abby said to me the other day, I've sort of put out a call, anyone do a bit of supper for Sunday night? And said, oh yeah, I could do something light. Now, Abby catered for our wedding. She catered for Scott Higgins' retirement dinner the other night. She's got a 60th birthday. Well, she's had a 60th birthday. She's got a 60th function coming up. I think she's probably catered for it. And then, this is just a light supper that she puts together. So thank you very much, Abby, for providing that. So there probably will be a very brief break. We'll see how we go with the interview. Very brief break. You could make some tea or coffee. And then afterwards, for those who wanted, there's plenty of food options down the road if you wanted to kick on a bit, particularly Raj's Corner, So yeah, so people did want to sort of kick it. Sort of the time of night, you may not want to go and get your sort of coffee now, but yeah, there is that option to do that. Then again, seeing how we go, we'll probably have a bit of a Q&A. So the thing there, we'll put up a mobile number on the screen that belongs to Pick. Where's Pick? Steve Pickering. And you could send your questions to that number, and Steve will sort of collate them, pick out some common themes and maybe reword a bit or whatever. Then, so the questions will go through Steve. So there is that opportunity to ask Tim some other questions. So that's where we're heading. So thank you very much for being part of it. Now, Tim and Meredith have been up this weekend for a retreat up at Dungog at Fosserton. Many of you know Max and Brom and Grieve. And then he's back here. So he was up there, and we've sort of had a long arrangement with Tim that if he's up here, rather than just ring me up on the day and say, can we have coffee? That's really nice, but let's involve you somehow. So he called back, said he's available this weekend, and also declined an honorarium. So I said, are you happy if we do have some an optional donation to Nepal? And he was very happy with it. So thank you very much for that, Tim. And Sue Clark is now going to come and tell us about the project. So Sue came on a trip 2012 that a few of us went on with our families and kids and got all enthused about Nepal. We've been back there many, many times, done some research work in kids' health as well. So Sue, tell us a little bit about our projects in Nepal.
So the project that we're supporting tonight is the best value for your development money that you could possibly find. So it's a very small project run by a local Nepali church that was started by Nepali Christians, and they run it themselves, and they have a few employees, and they do this amazing, amazing work. They're called Milap, which means reconciliation, and they're in Nepalganj in Nepal. Next slide, please. So this is Nepal. We all think about the mountains, but actually a lot of people live down on the plains where it's very poor, and Nepalganj is down on the Indian border, and it's a very poor place. Next slide, please. So what the Milap does is they work with local authorities. They get allocated places to work in development, and they go into these kinds of places where people are living on sort of unowned land and things like that, and start by doing community consultation about what might be needed. Next slide, please. But the key part of this process is women's groups. So women get together, they talk about what might be needed, they do health education, they do microfinance, and it's a really empowering model so that the change happens from the ground up, and it's a very inexpensive model as well. Next slide, please. These children in this particular area also are not in school, even though education is compulsory. A lot of school, especially if they're itinerant or they belong to a marginalised community, it's very hard for the kids to start school if they're older. And so they do small amounts of schooling and then help integrate them and support them with education as well. Some other things they do, next slide please, is they do microfinance. So this woman is a widow, and she had no means of supporting herself. So through microfinance, she was able to have some goats and have some business like that. Next slide, please. Other things they do is they liaise with local authorities and other NGOs to do things like toilet building. So there were no toilets in this village. There's funding and there's programs, but people often don't know about them. So a big thing is liaising with other different NGOs that are there. Next slide, please. So it's a real grassroots program. Any money that we raise goes directly into Milap, and they're completely financially accountable as well. So it's really great on the ground work, and you could not do better.
Thank you, and you couldn't do better either, Sue. Thank you. So there was an opportunity to donate on the way in. Now that you know a little bit more about it, you might like to donate on the way out. And there are those little sheets. We haven't quite got our little square set up, but there is our bank account details of that account, and you could transfer some money. When I was 13, I ran my first City to Surf, and today was the 50th anniversary of my running in the City to Surf. You can do the maths. Now, I've run 11, I haven't run all of them, although on the way today I did pass one of the legends who have done all 55. Bruce, I had a bit of a chat to him. They get sent off with the elite wave, so like I was behind and sort of caught up to him, had a bit of a chat to Bruce, but that's not a bad effort. and did that with a family summer here. And Sam, you ran it as well. Well done. There could be other people here who did. Ah, Fiona, well done. So some of my memories of early City to Surf, not so much today because the weather wasn't so good. You run through the Double Bay area and you've got people up on the balconies, and that is an event. The City to Surf is an event. They get dressed up to the hilt. They have jazz bands. They have their wine or whatever they have early in the morning and just watch the runners go by from the balcony, and they have a great time. But down on the road, you've got thousands of people doing it pretty tough, running hard, sweating, possibly finding it hard, and possibly having a greater sense of achievement at the end of the day. A theologian from a generation or more ago, James Mackay, maybe John Mackay, talked about two approaches to life. You can live it from the balcony, where you watch the world go by, or you can live it on the road, where it's hard at times, it's tough, but there is much more meaning, and it's just much more the reality of life. So I think you can easily grasp, without even running the City to Surf, I think you can very easily grasp that analogy of watching and being a spectator, maybe a little bit critical from the balcony, or being down there on the road. And I think a person who has lived their life very much on the road and has helped many other people live life on the road is Tim Costello. So I just had to get the City to Surf in there. We've dealt with that now.
I know.
I didn't win. A few people have asked me, but it doesn't mean I lost. No one else here won. So.
Can I start by saying I was a patron one year for the Melbourne Fun Run, which is your City to Surf, and I was running 10K.
That's down south, right?
That's it.
Yep.
It's a little village just south of Hamilton, Melbourne. And the night before, all the serious runners were there, and as the patron, they interviewed me. They said, tell us about your training. I said, I haven't done any. They said, well, tell us what you like about running. I said, finishing. They said, so why are you running? I said, to raise money for World Vision. I was CEO of World Vision. They said, well, these are serious runners. You're the patron. Tell them something to encourage them. I said, look, I've read the people who jog every day of their lives live on average 11 years longer than people who don't jog. The only problem is they've spent those 11 years jogging. They've never invited me back.
So, Tim, a man of many hats, and you like wearing your hat, so there'd be at least husband, father, brother, uncle. I met your nephew the other day. You've also been a lawyer, you've been a pastor, a mayor, a CEO of a large organisation and involved in many other organisations, known as an anti-gambling. Are you a gambling reformer or an anti-gambling reformer?
Gambling reformer. Anti-gambling sounds like I'm a prohibitionist, which the media always get wrong. Gambling reformer.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that clarification early on. Yeah, so lots of things. You wear many hats and recently turned 70.
The 70 was not that significant for me, except when we had a party. Every single guest said, 70, wow. How do you feel? I didn't feel any different. But so many people said it to me, I thought, I'm meant to feel something very different. So I'm still puzzling over that.
So we're looking really to look through a bit of your life story with a particular interest in some points perhaps where there's been a turning point in your thinking or your faith, because I guess by and large you come from a fairly conservative Christian background. I don't know what you call yourself now, maybe a more progressive Christian. So I'm just wanting to particularly pick up some of those points. So have you done much reflecting on the 70 years now that people have pointed out to you the importance of it?
I do reflect that when my father turned 70, I thought, that's the end. He's gone. It's all over. And
Had he done 11 years jogging or not?
yeah, probably. I do think we actually are very blessed that whether it's medical science or better education around diet and physical fitness, we're much younger 70s than our fathers were. And so I do reflect on just the difference in generations and where I've landed.
So where you've landed, but from where you started, so just very briefly, your family of origin, who that was made up of, where you lived, and maybe some early, what was the faith culture of your family as you were growing up?
So Dad was a Methodist lay preacher, but baptised Catholic. He had a conversion at 19 that's really a testimony to the power of sport. He wanted to play for the best cricket team in his suburb. That happened to be the Methodist cricket team. He had to go to church, and it really resonated with him, and he got converted. His father was very hostile to religion. His mother, where Costellos are all Catholic, had him secretly baptised without her husband even knowing. As a Methodist lay preacher, and he'd fought in New Guinea, Kokoda Trail, he got his chance to go and matriculate. He had been bright, but forced to leave school at 14. Work in a women's hosiery factory. He actually thought that would be him for the rest of his life. War gave him his opportunity. Coming back, returned soldiers, studying, matriculating, went to university, met my mum, 12 years younger than him. She was a Presbyterian. When they got married at Murrumbina Presbyterian Church in 1953, my father's brother had become a committed Catholic, married a very strong Catholic woman, my aunt. They stood outside the Murrumbina Presbyterian Church because it was a mortal sin for a Catholic to go into a Protestant church. And my mother's Presbyterian side of the family never forgave them. And I remember as a young toddler, walking down the street, hand in my mother's hand, someone would walk past and she would spit out, "He's got the map of Ireland all over his face." And I would stare as a 6-year-old at the face trying to see the map of Ireland. So we forget today when we talk about polarisation, which is intense, Australia was very polarised. Catholics and Protestants were very polarised. Sigmund Freud would call it the narcissism of small difference here. You actually worship the same God, believe in Jesus, read the same book, and hate each other's guts. Think Sunni and Shia, even think Jews and Samaritans, who actually, in the story Jesus told, Samaritans and Jews both believed in Yahweh, kosher, circumcision, Sabbath rules, but hated each other's guts. And so Mum Prezi, Dad Methodist, didn't own a car, carved a house out in the orchards of the eastern suburbs of Melbourne called Blackburn. Started because they didn't have a car and couldn't get to the Presbyterian or Methodist church, a little lay fellowship in their home that became Blackburn Baptist, now called Crossway, the biggest Baptist church in Melbourne. So,
Well, in Australia, I think.
maybe in Australia. Yeah. Oh. So we grew up with that. It was interesting reading the differences. Dad had this quite extraordinary born-again experience and was, as a Methodist lay preacher, very focused on sin, fall, the gospel that redeems. Mum, as sort of a, you might say, liberal social Presbyterian, her faith started with creation. God created the world and it is good. So she loved art, music. She actually was much more worldly than Dad, drink. Well, she said she wasn't a drinker to appease my dad, but she had a bottle of brandy that was only in the cupboard for the Christmas pudding, but it had to be renewed every month. So Dad's sort of faith started with fall and sin and cross and salvation. Mum actually modelled creation is good. Before the fall, it was good, and had a sort of broader faith. So I did grow up. It's only later that I've reflected on this with interesting representatives of Christian faith in my parents.
Jumping ahead, you study law at Monash University for 5 years or so. What were you thinking the trajectory of your life might have been? And was that your choice to do law?
At year 12, my parents, particularly my mother, took me aside and said, Tim, we both, your father and I, want you to go to university. You have to really study hard. And I remember thinking, okay, here's the first rung of the ladder called the career ladder. I did well enough to get into law. I really chose law because it was the longest degree and I didn't want to work. It was 5 years. In fact, after doing law, I did a dip ed. I still didn't want to work. 6 weeks of teacher training in dip ed convinced me law is a very good idea. I'm so impressed with teachers, discipline and responsibility for 25 kids. I remember after getting into Monash, my parents had a celebration at a local Chinese restaurant. After speeches, the Costello family were brought up on speeches. My mother took me aside. My father was there. She said, fancy getting into law. She said, now, Tim, you really have to work hard. Study hard. I said, why? She said, well, not everyone who gets a law degree gets a job at the end. Only those with a good law degree. I thought, here's the next rung on the ladder called career. I had a great time. I got articles at the end of 5 years. I turned them down to go and do a dip ed, but then I decided, no, I want to be a lawyer. I got articles. My parents were so thrilled. They had a family celebration at the same Chinese restaurant. My mother took me aside and she said, your father and I are so proud of you. Articles. She said, but now, Tim, you really have to work hard. And when I said why, she said, not everyone who gets articles gets kept on in a law firm. By then I had a younger brother also doing law. You would have never heard of him. And I remember thinking, here's the next rung of the ladder, and I keep climbing and I'll get associate, maybe partner, more pay, bigger car, more social status. This is what life is about. And it was after 3 years of law, I'd been offered a partnership, that I got off that ladder. I said, I actually want to go and study theology. And Meredy and I at 25 turned down a partnership. My parents, my mother, distressed, very distressed, to leave and go and study theology.
Yeah, thank you. Now, as you're doing that, you're also quite involved in local Christian ministry. In fact, you'd been an associate pastor of a church as well. You went to study at a place called Rushlakon overseas. Just tell us a bit about your thinking about studying overseas. Why did you do that?
So we both wanted to get out. By then, I was sort of a bit of a poster child in Melbourne for youth work, and the churches we'd been involved in, lots of young people came, and I was a bit of an evangelist. I'd been trained in open-air preaching. So would Peter, by the way. When people say to me, how did Peter dominate question time when he was in Parliament? I'd say open-air preaching. You actually learn to cope with interruptions, to think on your feet, to respond. We were preaching at 17, 18 to groups in caravan parks of 500, 1,000. But we knew enough, both Meredy and I. Meredy's here, by the way.
She was even welcome.
You're welcome.
She was welcome. Yeah.
Okay. We knew enough to go. If we study theology in our hometown, the pressures of already reputation, the family pressures. Dad had taught He was a school teacher. Mum was a school teacher. But Dad, after school, taught for 30 years Greek, New Testament Greek, voluntarily at Melbourne Bible Institute. Dad actually, had done Greek when he came back from the war at university. But he had I got wonderful memories of Dad, always on his knees, his New Testament Greek Bible open, reading it, the original. But he had a very, let's call it, I guess it was Wesleyan, Methodist, born again, you have to be born again experience, which I'm grateful for. But I knew that if we were studying in Melbourne, the family pressure of don't stray from the path, don't ask these questions, already a reputation for being a bit of an evangelist, child wonder. And I had done 3 years of law, family and criminal law, and I literally was getting knocked about. Family law is representing people who once loved each other, now scratching each other's eyes out over custody, over the house. Criminal law, and I loved law. But every crim I defended, I was a defence lawyer, was repentant on the court steps. You keep them out of prison, they go back to crime. And I'm starting to go, this is not helping. What am I doing? I want to actually not become a minister. We didn't go to theological college to become ministers. I went to be a better Christian lawyer. My passion was already justice. But we knew that we couldn't ask those questions in Melbourne. So we went to Switzerland and had 4 years of study there, which was absolutely shaping and formative of both of us.
Yeah, now I think when you came across some other Europeans, I think maybe Italians and Germans who had a different expression of faith and did things that you were told not to do.
So we knew at Blackburn Baptist, now Crossway, that God was in heaven. Robert Menzies was in the lodge. All Christians vote Conservative for Robert Menzies. We knew that dancing was sinful. If at 21 we wanted even a bush dance for our 21st birthday, we had to go down to the Uniting Church because it was in the Constitution. Baptists didn't dance. We know what that might lead to.
A few people know that one, I think. But
we didn't drink alcohol. And what Rushlicken did for us with European Baptists, actually African Baptists, Indonesian, but mainly European Baptists, all the Germans and Brits who were starting to be Baptist ministers drank, many of them smoked. Wow. The Scandinavian Baptists had different views on sexual issues than we had ever heard in our Baptist church. This is in the early 80s. The Italian Baptists shocked us most. They all voted communist. They believed that the Christian Democrats in league with the Catholic Church and the mafia would never clean up Italian politics. Now, it wasn't Stalinist politics, it was Berlinger, more soft communism, Stalinist communism, it was more soft. They all voted communist. Well, did this peel our banana? We were suddenly going, what is gospel and what is culture? How do we distinguish between these? So in many ways, that was the big learning at Rushlicken.
so you come back to Australia, and with your reputation you had before you went, now enlarged by being overseas, you possibly could have had the pick of a pastor of being a Baptist pastor in a large, prestigious church, but you didn't do that. You went to a very almost with 10 members, I think, of St Kilda Baptist. So tell us a bit about your thinking there about in doing that, of not doing what was expected, and how did things unfold at St Kilda?
So we had calls from big eastern suburban churches. That's the Bible Belt. Blackburn, where I grew up, is the buckle of the Bible Belt. And our parents, my parents, your father was president of the Baptist Union of Victoria in what year? Meridy's Pedigree Baptist. I married up, batting above my average. And they wanted us in senior minister, a big Baptist church. By that time, we had actually discovered that Jesus and Paul stand in the shoes of the prophets. Isaiah, Amos, Micah, let justice roll down. What does the Lord require of you but to love justice? And literally our faith and theology had changed. And we said, we can't just go to a place where we know the gospel works. In the eastern suburbs, you basically open a Sunday school, it's full. Start a youth group, it's packed. Have church services and they'll be full. We know the gospel works there. The inner city of Melbourne, which wasn't any less populated, basically all the churches had died. St Kilda Baptist, less than 10 members, all over 85 or over 80. Hadn't had a full-time pastor for 30 or 40 years. Other churches in St Kilda, Pentecostal had tried and hadn't been able to survive. Salvation Army had become an op shop. We said, so does the gospel work in the inner city, or is the gospel just a cultural phenomenon? The sociology has to be right. And we turned down those offers. We actually initiated contact with St Kilda. They couldn't pay us, but they said, I said, if I open a legal office, will you let me run a legal office in the church? Because I hadn't had a call to be a minister. I'd had a call for small M ministry, but as a lawyer. And they said yes, a bit surprised. I remember saying to them, you've got to write and invite us. I got a jagged bit of paper, has obviously been torn off a pad, one sentence, dear Mr. Costello, will you come and be our minister at St Kilda? Our contemporaries, British, German, Austrian, were getting calls in the fourth year. They'd get pictures of the manse, salary package, removal costs. I remember showing my contemporaries, yeah, we've had a call. Here it is, this jagged bit of paper. So that's how it happened for us to go to St Kilda, to open a legal office straight away in a church that basically had died.
Tell us about your first legal client.
Yeah, I put up the legal shingle, and in walked a woman with a terrible black eye. The way she was dressed alerted me immediately to what probably her occupation was. And she said, you're a lawyer, I need a lawyer. I said, that's what we're here for. She said, I'm up on charges of soliciting for the purposes. I pulled out my diary. I said, when's the case on? She looked at a watch and said, in 10 minutes' time. St Kilda Magistrates Court was literally around the corner. I said, okay. Grabbed a suit coat, said, let's go. I'll take instructions as we walk to court. So I'm listening to her priors and the offence as we walk there. And I'm really worried about the black eye. I said, look, I'm really worried. I think you need medical attention. I could get an adjournment. She said, no, it's fine. And if you're wondering, I haven't been beaten up. She said, I'm a heroin addict. That's why I'm soliciting. I reckon I'm going in today. So yesterday, I thought this will be my last hit of smack. I couldn't find a vein in my arm, so I shot up behind my eye. I freaked. I'd grown up in the Bible Belt of Melbourne. I didn't actually know about this level. I get to court. I do the plea in mitigation to keep her out and manage to avoid a custodial sentence. She, in a crowded court, other barristers looking at me, is so over the moon, before we've left court, she throws her arms around me, plants a big kiss on my cheek, and said, that's a fantastic result. let me take you out to lunch. I saw everyone staring at me. And it's interesting, in that moment you hear what voices you hear. I literally heard my mother's voice. And her mantra had always been, Timothy, you're known by the company you keep. I knew what Mum was advising. I did hear in that moment what I believe was God's voice, and it was, what are you afraid of? Your reputation? You've been discovering that Jesus was a friend of women just like her. So we're still in court, at the back of the court at this point. I said, that's lovely. Where do you want to go for lunch? She says, the Catholic church down the road puts on a great free lunch. I go, oh, damn, I'm caught. So we start walking from the court down Grey, Inkerman, Grieve Street, which is the red light area, to the Catholic Church. And it was the most important orientation for ministry in St Kilda I had. She's pointing out pimps. She's pointing out cars cruising. This is in daylight. She's saying most of them are married men. I didn't know that. I said, how can you get into a car with central locking, not knowing who that person is? She said, well, it's because I'm desperate for the heroin, but it hasn't always been that way. She said, when I was 15, one of the many men that came through Mum's life, who Mum thought she was in love with, this is the one, that man raped me. I tried to tell Mum. Mum did not want to know. She loved him. I felt so unsafe, I left. She said, I ended up on friends' couches until their mum would say, has this kid moved in? And I'd move somewhere else until I ran out of friends and I was on the street. She said, how am I going to survive? She said, well, that's what men do. That's what I have to do to survive. In that moment, all my judgment, I was judging her, absolutely dissolved. What did I know, having grown up in a safe, loving family, of trauma, abuse, violation, this deep? So, that was my first legal client.
And how did the gospel go in St Kilda? That's an
So we saw the church grow to a couple of hundred people. We started a street church called House of Hope on Fitzroy Street in the red light area, feeding every day. We took over and bought a house called Micah House, Hebrew word house of refuge, for runaway kids. If you're in the 80s running away from your family, you always ran to St Kilda. St Kilda was the magnet catchment area for runaways. We took over a special comm. We had love feasts, funny name to think about it in St Kilda. Every Friday night, a meal and street people welcome. We set up a whole range of programs saying our church motto was committed at the core. We were always committed to Jesus, open at the edges. And we tried to live that out.
Committed at the core,
open at the edges.
Tell us a bit about your foray into local government politics, in which you became the mayor of St Kilda.
Yeah, so I had connected with some people who were running, as independents called it, Turn the Tide, and run sort of as a dummy candidate for them, because, you know, the way politics works is you have your real candidate and a few front people at local council. I then, getting to know, they were secular people. St Kilda's a very secular city. I was reading my Bible, Isaiah 65. They shall build houses and live in them. No longer shall they build houses and others live in them. And God really spoke to me. I thought, that's a word for St Kilda. What's our issue? It's homelessness. We had less than 1% of all the housing stock in St Kilda that was affordable or social housing. It's no mystery we have homelessness. Most places in Australia, it's less than 4%. Of all housing stock, that's social and affordable housing. Scandinavian countries, it's 20%. You're always going to have up to 20% of the population with addiction, with domestic violence, with poverty. If you don't have places, they're homeless. That's how it works. So I said, I want to run seriously for council, not as a dummy candidate, a front candidate. Ran, got elected, became mayor, read out Isaiah 65 in my mayoral induction. I saw all my secular mates' eyes rolling. Gosh, he's pulled out the Bible. Should we have backed a Baptist minister? St Kilda now has over 10% of all its housing that's social and affordable housing. Ratepayers' dollars going in to social and affordable housing. We kept winning elections saying we don't want St Kilda to be like Carlton where you've got to drive a Beamer and wear a Rolex watch, and we actually like culturally the fact that there have been people in workers' cottages servicing the docks, lower socio-economic groups who can at least use the beach, because St Kilda's on the beach, not being pushed to the backs of Melbourne. And we ran it politically, we won power, it's continued. First council anywhere in Australia to put ratepayers' dollars into social housing. I was flown around to South Sydney Council, became the second to speak to them. So, yeah, that was the story.
And somewhere along the way, you got the attention of the Premier of Victoria. Tell us a bit about your relationship with Jeff Kennett.
So, Jeff Kennett came to power on the back of financial bankruptcy under Labor. And it was Labor that had actually Joan Kerner, the first female Premier, Labor Premier, who had first granted the tender, the licence for a casino, later to say, the greatest mistake of my life. Jeff Kennett then, as Premier, became the greatest spruiker of the casino. It went to 3 times its tender brief. Crown Casino is 3 times bigger than the biggest casino in Las Vegas. And at least in Las Vegas, you've got to fly out to a desert, work out how much you want to lose and get home. Crown's in a city of the central South Bank side of 5 million people. Jeff Kennett decided that in addition to Crown Casino, he became the great spruiker, calling for a gambling-led recovery in Victoria. I remember watching him open the temporary casino, and he said, "This casino is a beacon of hope. This casino represents the new spirit of Victoria." Now, hope and spirit are important words for me. As a minister of religion, I go, what? He's not talking about the Eiffel Tower or the Sydney Harbour Bridge. He's talking about a casino. He then, to fill the casino rooms and gambling rooms, said, and the Grand Prix that we have pinched from Adelaide is going to go into Albert Park Lake, which is right next to the casino. Parkland, part of it in St Kilda. So as Mayor of St Kilda, I became not only Jeff Kennett's largest critic, but the Labor opposition was so reduced just down to 10 members of Parliament. I became what the press for the next 4 or 5 years called the de facto leader of the opposition. So I was the go-to saying, this is about greed and casinos and addiction and parklands being taken over. We had purpose-built Sandown, Port Phillip, Grand Prix tracks, but it had to be there in Parkland to fill a casino hotel. So Jeff Kennett and I, let's say, exchanged a lot of love messages in the media at that time.
He had a term for you, something parsonly, annoying parsonly.
Yeah, he called me un-Australian. He called me a troublesome priest, a left-wing cleric. He had a lot of terms for me. We had at the, not the casino party, so the casino spends 30-40 million on its opening night. And the next week I had Paul Kelly and Archie Roach, and my friend the chocolate cake, and Rachel Griffiths, you know the actor, for our Not the Casino party. And Rachel Griffiths gave a great speech saying, "I am a proud un-Australian," like Tim, what the Premier was calling me.
Now, he tried to court you at some stage. Didn't he take you up the top level of something and show you?
He did. So when I finished up as mayor and went to Collins Street Baptist, the city central church, Kenneth invited me to the top floor of where his offices were. They were then in ANZ Towers, you know, towering the city. He said, Tim, we've had our fights, but look, Tim, I just want to mend bridges. Now, let me show you my vision for Melbourne. And we're looking out over Melbourne. He said, no, don't look down there. I know you don't like Crown Casino. We'll never agree. But what I'm going to do here, let me just explain the vision. He said, Tim, anything you want me to open, I'll come and open. If your programs, we'd set up a NGO for homeless and drug affected called The First Step. We'd set that up in back of the church. I'll open it, I'll fund it, you know. And I'm listening to all of this and I'm having this spooky feeling. Where have I seen this scene before? Most recently, I'd seen it in Jesus of Montreal. Do you remember that film? The temptation scene. And, you know, I was polite and went back to attacking Jeff Kennett.
Now, politically, you were courted by another party, which you... Tell us that one.
So I was finishing up as Mayor of St Kilda. That was Jeff Kennett dissolving councils and amalgamating them. So St Kilda with 70,000 people was too small, had to be amalgamated with South Melbourne Council and Port Melbourne Council, and we're all sacked and commissioners were put in. And at that time, Cheryl Curnow with Senator Sid Spindler came to the mayoral office in St Kilda. They'd been following me in the press. Sid Spindler, a senator, had a bad back, needed to retire. He and Cheryl said, casual vacancy, you go straight into the Senate. You're good at politics, you'll be a leader of the Democrats, you know, one day. And I must admit, I was sorely tempted. What I say now is politics has always been my temptation, but not my vocation. So Meredy and I went up to Canberra with the kids, met with the Democrats, Cheryl, and the press got word that this might happen. Big story. It would be the first time you had in the same parliament brothers in different parties. It's never happened, still hasn't happened. You've had brothers like the Kemp brothers, you know, and who was the member here? I know Fitzgibbon didn't have his brother there. There's been others anyway. Just retired. I remember the Labor brothers here. Anyway, suddenly my brother's in meltdown. He's already in Parliament. My parents are in meltdown. There are very powerful Christians coming. When I was away visiting Meredy, I don't think she'll mind me saying John Smith of God Squad and saying, Tim has to do this. And other CEOs of Christian organisations, Tim has to do this. And then there's the family side, which is unbelievably difficult. And how did this resolve? Because I thought I can do this. You know, surely Peter and family bridges could mend if I'm careful. Mind you, it would have been virtually impossible. The Democrats had the balance of power, which meant Howard and Peter had to go cap in hand. GST, you might remember those issues. I'm speaking on a Sunday, Easter Sunday, for Fusion. And big march, Resurrection Sunday, and the MC steps forward and he's introducing me as the speaker. And he says, Tim, you are our voice. For Christians, you are so important. And in my head, I'm thinking, the church is a pretty small box. I'm out of here. I'll go and walk the corridors of power. And as he kept introducing me that way, God did speak to me. And I remember my eyes filling up with tears. I just knew I wasn't going into politics. And I didn't. And I have learned that politics has always been my temptation, but not my vocation.
And that's not to say it may be fine for other people to do.
Oh, absolutely. No, we need good people in politics,
Sure.
just not for me.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that story, and you're still feeling the emotion of that. We've jumped over a little bit. You went from St Kilda to Collins Street, inner city church, much healthier state than when you first went to St Kilda. But you had some early experiences of there, I think, going up the steps of the church.
So, anyone ever been to Collins Street Baptist here? Les, of course. Great to see you here tonight, Les. And you, good. Oh, Rob.
That is Rob. I said he wasn't going to be here, but he is.
You've gone greyer since I saw you last. Sorry. Look at me. Who am I to...
Is that grey? I couldn't see a whole lot there, but I'll take your word. But anyway.
As our dear departed friend Tony Campolo would say, all men are given a certain amount of hormones. If some want to use theirs growing hair, that's their choice. Collins Street Baptist, magnificent Corinthian columns, one of the oldest churches in Melbourne, 1,000 magnificent organ, Rhodes minister in the choir, Central Baptist Church that started in 1846. Old to you, but Melbourne only started in 1836. So, and the issue when I started was homeless people sleeping on the porch under the Corinthian columns. And the church, it was very agitated, saying we've got to move them on, we've got to have security. This is stopping people who want to worship respectable Baptists. There are a few apparently. And I remember saying at that church meeting, my first, if we have to step over homeless to come to worship the Lord, might the Lord be saying something to us? So what was born was Credo Cafe, feeding the hungry, Urban Seed, drug detox ministry, and building a team of street workers, young people in their 20s, the first three. One was a medical doctor, now a very successful public medical doctor in Melbourne, and saying, how does the church, which has this glorious history and a pipe organ that's, sort of bigger than this building, how does this church actually have a ministry? And so that was Urban Seed being born.
So from there, you became the CEO of World Vision. So maybe tell us a bit about how that came to be. And I don't know if this was quite the right wording, but small church at St Kilda that grows, local politics, mayor, almost federal politics, Collins Street Baptist, World Vision, the stages and the arena is getting bigger. So tell us a bit about how that came about and what that was like.
So when at St Kilda and at Collins Street Baptist, I served on the board of TIER Australia. I always had deep feeling for the world's poor. I had gone, I don't think it was with Baptist World Aid, Les, but we did go to the Philippines, didn't we, together? Maybe before that, in a slum out of Manila, meeting a mum who had 2 kids, asking about her family, her telling me that she'd had 3 kids, one had died. I asked why. She said, well, got sick. I was told the child needed antibiotics, but if I spent the little money I had on antibiotics. I couldn't feed the other 2 children. Took the risk that this child would survive without antibiotics, and the child died. And I just remember, people mums making those choices. So I'd always had a passion. Before World Vision, I'd formed a Philippine Christian solidarity group, and World Vision literally tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to interview, and I was reluctant. Meredy said to me, you know, you're banging on about gambling. I've been doing that for 10 years, started in 1995, and, you know, as wives only can, I'm getting bored with you. You may need something different, you know. Go to the interview at least. Now, I love what I was doing at Collins Street Baptist. I was preaching on Sunday, Monday marching out to those Corinthian columns and doing all the TVs on gambling or other social issues, homelessness or Indigenous reconciliation. I thought, no, this is my calling. Turned down federal politics, you know. Went to the interview, and that board at World Vision was serious, and they offered me the job, and then I accepted it. It was a huge shock for me. So Urban Seed had about 20, 25 staff, but you could turn on a dime. You could change policy with a 5-minute conversation in the corridor. World Vision was 600 staff, $450 million, big management issues, you know, humanitarian relief, development, a massive marketing team, iconic sort of image with Australians who sponsor a child. And after my first week, I'm lying in bed on a Friday morning. I was meant to go to work. Meredy wakes me up and says, time to go to work. I said, I don't want to be a CEO, you go. Meredy's actually much better organised and a much better manager than me. So it was a huge step up and a huge shock. And I had to learn that there are aspects that I can contribute if I build a team that actually covers all the inadequacies that I have, which I did. And 13 years as CEO of World Vision, we achieved some big things.
So fairly early on in that career change was the big tsunami, and in a sense you became, I guess, almost the face of Australian response to that. And, you know, recently I've read your report. I don't know whose banner you went under when you went to Myanmar recently, and I read your report of, like, when you see tragedy on a huge scale, whether it's a natural disaster or human inflicted, personal response, and then what can you do, or what can an organisation do?
So, yeah, in my first year was the tsunami at one level, deep scars. The scars started earlier. I'd gone to Darfur in Sudan, and every second woman I talked to had been raped by the Janjaweed, the Arab black women, or their daughters. And I remember breaking down in tears on TV when I came back from Darfur. The tsunami intensified that. Mass graves, mainly women and children. They couldn't run as fast as men or climb a tree or hang on. They weren't as strong. Mass graves because they didn't want the outbreak of cholera. So people unnamed, unknown in death, literally being buried. The stench of those mass graves. No one prepares you for what that level of death is like, not to mention that horrific devastation. 300,000 people across 9 countries died with that wave. But a wave of generosity that came back from Australians. You know, World Vision raised $110 million in 6 weeks. You know, the first World versus Australia Test cricket organised in 8 days at the MCG. a test schedule takes 2 years to organise. And it was Adam Gilchrist and me working, and Tendulkar and Warren, and Warren's another story, I won't go there.
There is Q&A later.
Through the years at World Vision and since, to answer your question, you live with two things. One, guilt, and two, unresolved trauma. Guilt is that you get back on a plane and leave, and you know those people there can't. They're dependent on you. And the guilt is the feeling, have I actually done enough? And there's no answer, really. You've done your best. Trauma still happens today, albeit a happy occasion, totally unrelated to World Vision speaking, without warning, out of nowhere. I'll see the image of a refugee or a woman literally saying, take my child, take my baby. Suddenly I'll be in tears. People who are listening to me go, that's odd. What's he crying about? You realise you build walls around your emotions just to go on functioning, but the walls aren't watertight, they leak. I'm not ashamed of that, but you do actually live with it. It's a reality of the work you've done.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The world today, with its culture wars, polarisation, I mean, in Australia with our cost of living crisis, housing shortage, and then you go on the world stage, which just seems completely bizarre to anything we've ever experienced. From just what you've said there, and emotion and some words of Isaiah and others, at 70, are you optimistic? How do you feel about the world today?
I think hope. I've written a book on hope. I've written a book on faith. I started one on love. My wife said, I'm not sure you know enough about that. That's still to come. Hope for me is a choice. You know, optimism is a feeling. Half glass full person rather than half. Out of my faith, I say hope is a choice. God who created this world hasn't given up on it, has sent Jesus to redeem it. In the resurrection has begun a new creation. And it's not a preference, a feeling. It's a choice to believe that. For me, hope is something in the future which is really love in the present. I think all humans need love. We can only experience that in the present. For me, hope is love in the future, that it is a possibility, that it is real. I am distressed by what we're seeing. What we're seeing is the 3 Ps. It's populism, post-truth, and polarisation. And it causes me great grief that the mob I would have identified as my own, evangelicals in America, voted massively for Trump, 81%. I wrote an article in the Sydney Morning Herald saying I've lost my tribe. I can't believe that. Trump's with Musk, smashed USAID, 61 billion pulled out of the humanitarian system. That's going to cost 15 million lives in the next few years, according to Lancer Scientific Magazine. Only 4 million lives have been lost in the 21st century due to conflict and wars, 4 million. 15 million just by pulling. And I was in Kenya, Uganda, and bush hospitals in March when that decision was being implemented. I saw the ARVs, the TB, the malaria treatment flying out, and bush clinicians, very poor hospitals, in tears, saying these people don't have a chance without the medications USA. Same up on the Thai-Burma border 6 weeks ago. The 9 refugee camps of Karen, mainly Baptists, because the evil junta in Myanmar is bombing churches, bombing hospitals, bombing Buddhist monasteries, and they're Buddhist. The only NGOs there are the Baptist churches, and they're getting bombed, and they're trying to do medical care. The 9 refugee camps on the Thai border that the Karen have escaped to from Burma, USAID was feeding them. As of the 31st of July, all those 9 refugee camps closed because USAID was withdrawn. They don't have any right to work in Thailand. We don't know how they're going to survive. You know, I have, sorry to do name dropping here, tried to engage at international level. There's a thing called the G20. Have you heard of that? For 5 years I ran C20, Civil Society 20, in outreach of the G20. You have L20, Labor 20, B20, Business 20, and I was leading C20. And in 2013, I had a meeting for an hour and a half with Putin in his dacha outside of Moscow. And extraordinary in a number of ways. One being, had the TVs in the whole time. So confident he controls the media. Who has TVs before you've had a meeting and decided what you have resolved? Putin, hosting the G20, wanted to say, see, I welcome civil society. So 4 of us were there. We clashed over Syria. That was at its height then. We clashed over the Foreign Agents Law, which was Putin using the Foreign Agents Law to close down any Russian charity that took $1 or a volunteer from outside. They were playing politics. That's their foreign agents. I'd been briefed. I said, you only have 1 word in Russian where there's 2 words in English. The 2 words in English are policy and politics. Civil society will always criticise policy. It doesn't mean we're playing politics. It doesn't mean we are just your political enemy. I got a big concession because TVs are in there. It was Putin agreeing that he would ask the Duma to repeal the Foreign Agents Law. I saw myself on Moscow TV that night, read my comments in the English-speaking Moscow Times, was a hero for a year with all the charities in Russia. I saw Putin then in the G20 in Brisbane, you know, when Abbott, as Prime Minister, was going to shirt front Putin, that one. I said to Putin, you promised to repeal the Foreign Agents Law. He said, the Duma wouldn't agree. The Duma's their parliament, he controls it. The most interesting part was Putin was wearing a cross. Because I was a reverend, he wanted to tell me. He's telling young Russians to go back to church. They've only got vodka and materialism. He's giving millions of rubles to the church. They're building 3 a day. I'm listening and thinking, gee, I can't criticise that. So I pushed my luck and said, President Putin, that's very impressive. Let me ask you though, why did you send to Siberia for 7 years Pussy Riot for singing in St. Saviour's Cathedral? Putin says we had earpieces in and instant translation. You could understand Putin, could understand English. The church was offended. It's blasphemous. We're not going to tolerate that sort of thing. I said, yeah, I know the church was offended and you thought it was blasphemous. It was really protesting Putin, what Pussy Riot was singing. I said, but a Christian church, President Putin, a Christian church, understanding the gospel, would say, even if we're offended, the gospel is about forgiveness. We don't want them sent to Siberia, but forgive them. A look of utter incomprehensibility came over Putin's face. And he said, why would a church ever say that? And I realised the Orthodox Church had just become a department of the state. The Patriarch Kirill of the Orthodox Russian Church calls the war against Ukraine a holy war. Fellow Orthodox, Putin a miracle of God. So at international level, I've had some engagements, but right at the moment, it is hard to keep hope alive, yeah.
Okay. I didn't think we'd be getting to Putin tonight, but here we go. I'm going to ask one question of a very different nature, then we're going to have a very short break, very short. We're going to get Pic's phone number up on the screen for you to text your questions. So we might get that up if we can. Rick and people might want to. Questions, please, not so much comments, to the point, to allow Tim to address them. Not every question may get read out. I'm not sure how many we're going to get. Question of a different nature. I'm really interested to know how or what is your strategy of the gambling reform. And I don't want to get into the details of gambling, but as an example, in New South Wales, we've had a prominent person called Fred Nile, who's sort of not so around so much these days, but sort of have this view as a Christian that, you know, our society should follow Judeo-Christian rules, that if the Bible says it, society should adopt it. And it's just like this big clash that he gets these supporters from some Christians and people against it. I'm really interested to know, you get into gambling reform, you could be a wowser Christian who is against un-Australian and all this sort of thing. What's your approach to somehow getting in where you gather people on board, Christian or not, to rally behind? There's still a long way to go. I'm interested in your approach, how conscious that is that you do that. It's very different to that model.
Yeah, and curiously, Fred Nile never supported gambling reform. That's another story. Theologically, it goes like this. The last question the disciples asked Jesus before he ascended to heaven. Acts 1, 6 and 7. So if it's your last question, you'd make it a good one, right? They asked Jesus, is now the time you'll restore the kingdom to Israel? In today's language, that question goes like this. Lord, is now the time you'll make Israel great again? And Jesus won't have a bar on it. Jesus said, no, you're to be my witnesses, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the uttermost parts of the earth. Whether it's Trump and make America great again, Putin make Russia great again, Xi Jinping, China, Modi, India. I think Christians and other religions have always mistaken power and rule for witness. I think Americans who have backed Trump have said if we're in power and he's our man, we will get 10 commandments up in every school. We will abolish DEI, diversity and inclusion, because gender is clearly binary and we don't like those people. And wherever Christians have rule, it's true for any religious group for that matter, Modi's doing it with Hindutva, Sikhs, Muslims, Jains, Christians are getting smashed in India at the moment. Hindutva, which is Modi's BJP party ideology, is to be Indian is to be Hindu. You other religions are illegitimate. Trump, Vance, Rubio are sort of doing that in America. And it's the mistaking of power for witness. So when it comes to gambling reform, it's about witness. It's saying, just tell me, how do we get to the greatest gambling losses anywhere in the world? Why does New South Wales have 35% of the world's pokies in pubs and clubs? 35% of the world's pokies. Most pokies are in casinos, which is different. It's gambling, you plan to get there. Pokies on every fourth, fifth block mean you intended to go shopping and you've got another half hour on your meter and there's always somewhere open. The greatest losses, the greatest number, the greatest harm. why did the Prime Minister's peer review and domestic violence recommend a total ban on gambling ads? With there's gambling in the family, there's 4 times domestic violence. So I approach this as witness. I'm not saying if you politicians all shut up long enough and listen to Tim Costello, you would know the truth and you would do whatever I say. I want power. It's about witness, about raising. We have 80% of the public now on our side wanting gambling reform, the cashless card in pokies, the ban of the ads, which is at federal level. Normally you'd say, well, 80% of the public, a politician, of course, would follow that. No, no, no. Not when you're up against powerful vested interests. NRL gets 60 million a year. AFL, 60 million a year. Sportsbet, donations to the political parties. Even though parents are going, how come our 10-year-olds now talk about their NRL or AFL in terms of the odds? This is an adult product that's grooming them. We haven't got our politicians who are still utterly captured, breaking through. So for me, gambling reform is about witness. It's not about grabbing power.
Thank you for that. Very brief break. Go and enjoy some of Abby's stuff. Yeah, clap now. You can clap more later. Then we'll have not a too long period of time for you to ask questions. Get your questions in, and we'll wrap up. And those who want to wander down for dinner can do so. So, Tim, you come up here for a retreat with friends, Max and Brom, just very, very briefly, the nature of the retreat.
The nature? Excuse me, I'm eating my cheese and bickies. Why don't I invite Meredy up here to explain? Or
Is that, well...
Oh, the question. Oh, sorry.
you've got to answer the question.
Yeah. Well,
the nature of the retreat at Dungog, Fosterton, on a beautiful property.
it is a beautiful property. Well, we were asked to speak on leadership and in a fractured world or fracturing world, and so we did. We had 3 sessions, and Tim did 2, and I did 1. And Tim talked more big picture stuff with what's going on in the world and the challenge of leadership. I talked about, you know, us as leaders and how do we maintain the front stage where we're performing and what's happening in our backstage, what's supporting us, and how do we plug into supports that keep us grounded and humble. And then this 3rd session today was on legacy and what do we, you know, what sort of, at the end of our life, you know, what's our legacy and how do we think about our purpose. So it's good. It was small. There wasn't as many as they'd hoped, and you know, but quality. And Lucy's here because she was with us, and oh yeah, and Pic's here. So it was lovely. It was actually, you know, we had some downtime ourselves and a bit of a rest, which was lovely.
Thank you very much, Meredy. So I'll get Pic to fill the question. Now he might filter them, reword them, collate some, and that sort of thing. So your question may or may not get read out, may or may not be in the exact form, but it might be.
No, I don't think so. No.
I didn't realise this was interactive, but anyway.
I did think this question was asked on someone else's behalf till I got up here and saw that there were a few people who don't have grey hair here tonight. So is the church still relevant to young people?
I wonder who asked that question. I can see the name that came in, but We'll keep that anonymous. What do you mean by that? Okay, just quickly again, the question.
Is the church still relevant to young people?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Just for a start, there still are within Australian society very few places where you can gather week by week, hear a morally serious topic we call a sermon, gather afterwards to perhaps ask questions and connect and say, my question is, where you take up an offering, not just for your own needs, but for the needs of the community that you're in and for people overseas. That is very significant work still. What we're hearing in Great Britain, and we're seeing some signs of now, is what's called the quiet revival. And it's Gen Z particularly going back to church. Gen Z are interesting. They're not drinking like Gen Y, Gen X. They're not partnering as much earlier. They're asking deeper questions. And there is, in a number of parts of Australia, a surprising number of Gen Zs turning up and engaging. So, look, I think the pendulum swings, but my answer is yes. I think the church still is very relevant today.
Thank you. This is a very big but very practical question. Do you have any suggestions about anything practical that can be done about the ever-increasing inequitable distribution of wealth in Australia?
Yeah, well, we know that as soon as you try to have tax reform, those vested interests will scream, even though they've often been the ones screaming, we need tax reform, not just if it affects us. You know, I say to my own kids and their generation, I'm not sure why you're not marching in the streets. Us baby boomers have really shafted you. You know, we grew up when you had to work about 7 or 8 years to get a deposit for a house. Now it's, I forget the latest figure, but it's 18 years. We had the benefits of capital gains tax and negative gearing, and these are clearly inequitable. But with baby boomers being such a large voting majority, they're like the pig, the python that swallowed the pig. Therefore, both sides of politics have been terrified to address this. We certainly know that company profits and tax, we have to shift the burden just from income tax. And as soon as you start to touch that, you're in trouble. I was fascinated the Productivity Commission's recommendations is lessen tax for companies earning, what was it, less than $1 billion, was it? And massively increase for companies earning far more than that. That comes from our premier economic body. But will it happen? Gosh, as soon as there's tax reform. Why I'm talking about tax is the major social justice instrument in Australia is the Tax Assessment Act. We forget that. To say actually progressive taxation is those who are doing well and earn more will pay more. But whether we will get out of this next roundtable and productivity reform, the sort of tax reform, the equalising that you're talking about, redressing some of the blowing out inequality, this has major effects globally. Trump's victory, in part, is due to what we often call globalisation, which is let the jobs go to the countries which have the comparative advantage and lower costs to make them. Globally, that has massively increased wealth. Taiwan is fantastic at making chips. and Vietnam at footwear or China or whatever. Overall, this has massively increased wealth. Where globalisation fails and breaks down is if when that extra wealth comes into your nation, you do not have strong, equitable tax redistribution methods. You get those who have been affected by globalisation in America's red states, uneducated, haven't gone to university, had manufacturing jobs. There has not been, and it's a failure of the Democrats, to actually take that extra wealth and redistribute it to give hope and investment in depressed areas, and you get a Trump phenomenon. Curious, a billionaire is the champion of those who are, the poorest, but that's where we've got to. And a book that all our politicians are reading at the moment, Ezra Klein's book, Abundance, don't know if any of you have seen it, essentially is saying blue states in America massively failed, despite all their social justice rhetoric, to care for their own poor. And the poor have gone to red states. So it's a bit of blame to share around if you don't actually share the rewards of globalisation nationally.
Okay, let's change to a more theological question. So you studied in Switzerland and included Greek and Hebrew as understood it, and concentration on the Bible. And there's lots of views, I suppose, about the Bible and its infallibility possibly, or its practical use these days. So what's your journey been there, and where do you think about the Bible these days?
Well, this is the advantage now of 70 years. You look back, and we just knew the Bible said at Blackburn Baptist, where Dad was a deacon, but women could not be deacons, that this was biblical. And come deacons meeting over dinner, Dad would have a notebook. Mum would say to him over dinner, now we're short of Sunday school teachers, he'd write it down. The youth leader's struggling, he'd write it down. We need to consider these people who need pastoral visitations, he'd write it down. Dad would go off to deacon's meeting and pretend they were his ideas. And I remember as a kid going, why don't we let Mum be a deacon? We know who's running the church. All it did was make women manipulative, really, having to pretend their husbands were the leaders. The Bible was very clear in our minds on women, but we sort of started to go, hang on, we can read this a different way. Neither male nor female, Galatians 3:28. We knew in the late 70s, early 80s that Jesus had been very clear about divorce and remarriage. Except for fornication, he who remarries is committing adultery. Jesus had said that. And divorces amongst evangelicals were starting. And I remember for a while there, a short time, if you're a divorcee and remarried, you couldn't be on church leadership because the Bible was clear. And then we sort of said, you know what? Those divorced and remarried people, they're really good givers and they have gifts and we need them. And we found a way around it. You know, if we ask the question of the Bible, is the Bible against slavery? Only by implication. In the Hebrew scriptures, the Exodus, Leviticus and Deuteronomy discuss the question, can a Jewish man have a Jewish person as a slave? And I forget, I've got it in my head, but Leviticus said, yes, but after 6 years he must let the Jewish man be free. Sorry, can a Jewish man have a Jewish woman and a man as a slave. Yes, but after 6 years, he must set the Jewish man free. In Deuteronomy, yes, but after 6 years, he must set the Jewish man and the Jewish woman slave free. And then I think it's Exodus said, no way can a Jewish man have a fellow Jew as a slave. That was the level of discussion. Could you get from the Bible to actually say it's unequivocally against slavery? The answer is actually no. You can't. I know the journey of this church, and my position might be slightly different. I don't think you can get from the Bible to gay marriage, the Bible affirming it. I know the exegetical arguments, but I think neither in the Greco-Roman world or in the Bible could you actually mount a clear, unequivocal case. We've just read it wrong, and like we had with women or divorcees, I actually believe, like slavery, the issue of inclusion is going to be decided, can only be decided sociologically and anthropologically, saying actually, we don't accept that now, like we don't accept slavery, and trying to do it in a whole exegetical way doesn't get us there. I think I take the Bible very seriously, but I like Brueggemann. Brueggemann, who was an Old Testament scholar, died very recently. He said, the gospel is bigger than the Bible. I believe that.
One more. So 2 more. The first question you can answer, and sorry, to overrule you, Dottie. You did. I heard you very clearly. I just overruled you. You gave me the microphone. But you can answer the first question in less than 20 seconds, please, because it's about an irrelevant sport. Tim, how is your AFL team going?
Who was the saddest to ask that question? Out yourself. Out yourself. Oh, thank you.
Time's up.
I just want to say to Rob, it's true that I barracked for Essendon. It's true in 2012 we were rubbed out for drugs and have never recovered. It's true, Rob, we are the only AFL side that took non-performance enhancing drugs. If they'd helped our performance, I wouldn't mind, actually.
I feel like, New South Wales, rugby league, state, there is a team down your way, I think. AFL, but it's a very sort of Christian game, I think. You get a point for missing. I don't know why it's called a behind. No one's ever been able to explain because it's next. But yeah, Christian ethos. One more, Steve.
Okay, big picture to finish. Does Christianity make the world and individual people's lives better?
Yeah, I say unequivocally yes. For all the examples of where Christianity gets sick, and when it gets sick, it gets really sick. Absolutely. And I'd refer you to Tom Holland's book, Dominion, The Power of the Cross in Western Civilization. Secular historian, Tom. And Dominion essentially traces how, as a classical scholar, a classicist, Tom loved the Romans and the Greco-Roman world, but had this crisis when he was translating the Gallic Wars, written by Caesar, where Caesar boasts 1 million deaths of the Gauls and 1 million slaves. And suddenly Tom goes, Rome cheered, everyone cheered. I've been a passionate supporter of Rome and the big beast, amazing. They're not my values. Where do my values come from? Now, he's not a Christian, but he had an atheist father and an Anglican mother. He's British. And he writes in the book Dominion and then traces it through. My values come from Christian faith. The cross is an ethical vision from the point of view of the victim, the vulnerable. This is unknown, totally unknown, in other religions. And for all its, crusades and burning of witches, this ethic of actually saying the victim, the vulnerable, is God's son dying a slave's death. Crucifixion was regarded as a slave's death, has introduced a notion which was totally unfamiliar. I like to quote Tom Holland when I read Elon Musk, who smashed USAID. And up here, by the way, in Newcastle, we have Micah Australia that I work for that had the achievement of lobbying our politicians. Not only did Australian aid not get cut, it got increased in the last budget. British, Dutch, German, all cut, USAID cut, and it's largely due to Christians, particularly Christian women, pastors, going to Canberra and saying to our politicians, this matters, they are vulnerable, they're passionate, getting their attention. But Musk on Joe Rogan said, the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. We've been too concerned for the poor or refugees or people who are not like us. I want to finish, and Tom Holland has certainly helped me understand this in his book Dominion. Because the Good Samaritan has profoundly shaped Judeo-Christian culture, the fundamental strength of Western civilization has been empathy, particularly expressed in aid programs. Those people don't vote. They don't have any claim on us. So yes, unequivocally.
So being prepared to answer a range of questions. Thanks, Steve. As we wrap up, just remember you can make a donation to Nepal, get that with the bank details or put something in the box. And for those who want to, are there many people interested in heading down to Raja's Corner for dinner? All right. Oh, okay, all right. That's all right. There are other options down there. You could go home. Yeah, that's right. To thank Tim, we're going to cross live to Dungog, where Ali Martin is going to say a few words.
Thank you. Coming live from the farm and the beautiful area that you've been, Tim. And so I just want to say how much it's been a real encouragement tonight as a mother of Gen Z. And also I've got some fellow Zoomers here. Both my parents are online. So a whole family has benefited, as well as all of those in the room tonight. Your heart and your experience and your perspective has just been such a blessing, and it's come through to all of us. I'm sure it's in the room, but it's come through to us loud and clear here. So good to hear your stories. But I'm so glad also that the walls of the emotions around your heart do leak sometimes, because that we really felt that. So thank you for sharing the hard things as well. Thank you for your passion for justice. Some thoughts that stayed with me were around what is the gospel, what is culture, listening to the voice of Jesus in your head, not the voice of judgment, being committed at the core and open at the edges. Just beautiful. The fundamental strength of empathy, and that hope is a choice and it's love in the future. So some beautiful things for us to go away and reflect on. And I do look forward to your book on love. I think that'll be great. But I just wanted, to just represent some voices tonight and saying our many thanks to you for taking the time to come and share so generously, and rich blessings to you and Meredy. We're just so grateful. So thank you.
Thank you, Ali. You can't come to the Hunter Valley and not go home with a bottle of red and white. Now, just want to pull out the red. Now, 70, wasn't he? You've just turned 70? Yeah. Oh, look at that. Old Bones, Shiraz. That's an interesting... Our vigneron is here, James Clark. So enjoy. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I think National Living Treasure is a worthy title. Let's thank him. Well, it's been an evening with Tim Costello. I hope you've enjoyed it. Feel free to stick around, enjoy a few more things. And apparently there's no dinner down in Beaumont Street, but it was a good idea at the time. Thank you, everyone.